Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terry Carter, and I manage Elder Services here at our beloved West Medford Community Center. I just want to echo what Bill said in bringing you greetings and welcome from the center itself, also from members of our board of directors that sit in the audience. And you see Monique Doherty's here, and Brian Collins is here as well. As you well know, this is one of Medford's treasured historical and cultural centers, as well as a place that local folks have called their second home for a number of years. And as you came into the building, you see all around you the history that has been spoken of, the Elder Project, which is on the top of the walls, and the Afro-American Remembrance Project that adorns the walls both down here and upstairs on the second floor. As I passed 121 Sharon Street, on my way over, I was reflecting on what I knew of the Greenes as a child. And Oscar and Ruby were very much integral parts of the West Medford community, which is one of the oldest African-American communities in the United States, tracing its roots all the way back to just after the Civil War. In any event, Oscar and Ruby were very good to me as I was a young person. They had this tortoiseshell cat in that yellow and green house that y'all know. And when they would go away, they would have me come over and cat sit. They don't have the cat hotels back then that they have now, where you can drop your cat off and he's taken care of like he's at the Ritz. But I always felt honored to be included as part of their extended family. And you could tell that there was a literary craftsman that lived in that house because there were books all over the place. And nobody that doesn't read ever learns how to write. And one of the things that I, as a writer, I'm a poet, published and have a couple of books in print. But one of the things that I took away from my experience as a young person around folks like Mr. Greene in particular was that you could do anything that you wanted to. And to be a writer in this day and time is a difficult thing, but he always made it look so easy that I eventually came to a place where I thought that I could do it too. So we're here to pay honor to him. I don't want to take any more of your time. I just want to say that as institutions go, you're in one and you're getting ready to hear about one. So, in the words of the master craftsman himself, I want to present Mr. Oscar Greene. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Just looking for some chairs back here. Do we have
It's obviously very popular. Well, good afternoon. I'm Laura Duggan, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker of the day, Mr. Oscar Greene, a longtime resident of West Medford for 68 years, right? As you told me. This afternoon, he will be sharing some of his memories of this community. How can I describe my dear friend Oscar? Well, he's a gentleman in the finest sense of the word, and writer. Approaching 100 years old, he has not lost his gift to tell a tale. One that always touches and teaches his audience. And yes, gives you a chuckle. The author of 4 books, he was also a book reviewer for 10 years with the Boston Globe, and regular contributor for 34 years to Guidepost, a publication of inspirational short stories. And he's still active. Mr. Greene is a blogger for the Medford Grace Episcopal Church and teaches 2 classes at his Somerville residence. And as you will soon hear, a gifted speaker. And now, without any further ado, I give you Mr. Oscar Greene.
goodness, I never expected to see so many people. Westwood said that perhaps we should have communion after this. But I will say to those I know from the library, those from West Medford, those who were neighbors of mine, welcome. All right? And if I knew you were coming, I would have prepared something. Do you mind if I sit down? I'm having a little trouble with the legs today. I want to say that this goes with being 99 years old. And if you haven't heard yet, on the 28th of May, the holiday, I will be 100. And already, there have been countless parties planned. I don't know how I can avoid them. Any of you have any suggestions? You can invite me over for a weekend? Well, thank you. All right, Joe? This is so comfortable, I don't think I'm going to stop. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I'll put it down here. Memories of West Medford. You are probably wondering, where is West Medford? West Medford is an area bordered on the north by Boston Avenue, on the west by High Street, and on the east and south by the Mystic River. This community is a small, vulnerable, middle-class African-American settlement. It is also a tight-knit and self-providing place. I have enjoyed living in West Medford for 70 years. I'm sorry, Laura. For 70 years. I also enjoyed pioneering when I came to employment. From 1946 to 1957, I was with General Electric in Everett. As a lone, skilled Afro-American machine operator in a workforce of 1,800. Then in March 1957, I became a mechanical tester in the engineering division of General Electric in Lynn, Massachusetts. Later, I was appointed a test leader in charge of the test gang. Also in 1957, I left the 3 to 11 afternoon shift and joined the workforce. This was a welcome change as I began seeing my family after years and years of job separation. After this change, a neighbor asked me to join the Hobbs Junior High School, PTA, as our son Oscar Jr. was enrolled in Hobbs Junior High. This group met at the home of attorney and Mrs. Richard W. Bishop, living at that time on Auburn Street. At the first PTA meeting, Mr. Bishop presided, and he was superb. From that moment on, unbeknown to him, he was my mentor and my idol. Following the meeting, we were invited into the study for coffee and brownies. As we passed away at a nearby table, I noticed hardcover books with the name Bishop on the binding and on the covers. You know how I love books, and I always dreamed of being a writer. Then I turned to my courage and said, Mr. Bishop, do you have a brother who writes? Mr. Bishop smiled and said, call me Dick. No, I don't have a brother. Those books are mine. Are you interested in writing? If you are, I will send you some material. material. Take your time and learn how to write. The learning period will be about 2 years. Famed writers like E.B. White, Theodore Dreiser, and Ernest Hemingway say that the learning period is 14 years. For me, it's been 60 years and I'm still learning. The material from Dick Bishop arrived and I studied and practiced, often until 3 in the morning. I sold my first story to Highlights for Children. No, I'm not going to read it. But I wanted to show you the story, how it looked. And this was in 1963. All right, though? Yes. I wrote, then after this was published, I wrote 7 days a week. 7 days a week. But it was 15 years before I sold my next story to Guidepost in New York. Now, this here, most of you, some of you have seen this. This was my story here. You can't see it from there. Goodness. There. There. But this is the one that they never put out. But they had the money. So I was able to get a copy when I went down to the editorial offices in New York. Now you see the title there. Better Not Go, Oscar. That was a terrible disappointment to me. My title was The Night Fear Almost Won, which I still think was a superior title. But the editor at that time was Arthur Gordon. He said my title telegraphed the story. And I couldn't have that, yeah. And then, after that, after the story was published, I got a call from a lady named Terry Castillo. And she asked me would I like to write for Guidepost. And that was in 1984. You know, I was so pleased I couldn't eat supper. But she said you will have to make it, you'll have to write a story or maybe 2 stories and then we'll judge whether you have the ability. So I did write the story. Took me about 3 weeks to write it and 4 weeks to correct all the mistakes. And it came out that I joined the staff of Daily Guidepost. Some of you have seen it, a much smaller book. And I think Allison has some of the books up in the Historical Society. But I worked for them for 34 years. Yes. At one time, if I remember correctly, I was the only person of color working for them. And I spoke about to one of the people in the neighborhood here that I hoped they would continue hiring me. I received a contract every year, continue hiring me. And one of the ladies who lived down the street said, they're not going to fire you. You don't need to worry about that. So that was it. So 34 years there. And I retired from there in 2014. Could I write for them now? After being away 4 years? No. No. I think I've lost something. Yeah. That's it. The Guideposts. After more hard work plus encouragement from Dick Bishop, I began writing for the Boston Globe. And writing for the Boston Globe was just a wonderful experience for me. And to me, but once a year, we met together in Boston in a very plush place. One time was the Ritz Hotel. And I remember I walked in the Ritz Hotel, and this very tall, very handsome man walked in with me, or I walked in with him, and a fellow bowed and said, "Welcome," not to me, but to him. And he was the owner and editor of the Boston Globe. Now, if I'd have walked in there alone, there'd have been some questions. And I served as a writer for the Boston Globe for 10 years. And I worked for a fellow named Herb Kenny. I don't know if any of you may have known him. In 1968, Dick Bishop recommended me to serve as a trustee at the Medford Public Library. I don't think any of you knew that I was a trustee there. All right, though?
I did.
And then later I became a cooperator at the Medford Savings Bank. Then in 1971 I became a director, followed by being chairperson of the audit committee and clerk of the corporation. I did not tell people in the neighborhood that, because I did not want them thinking I could go down and reach into the cash register and help myself, you know. I recall writing the first report for the Medford Commissioner, the banking commissioner. That was in Boston. Tom O'Connor, president of the Medford Savings Bank, asked to review the report. Tom read it, looked up and said to me, "Would you mind if I changed one word?" I almost fainted. How did I first decide to come and live in West Medford? It's because I hungered for a small, nurturing Afro-American community, so I could benefit from the neighborhood strength and where I could make forays into the white community. I also remember the words of Charles Darwin, who said, "There is no horror like idleness." Most of my summer of 1939 in Williamstown, Massachusetts, I beg your pardon, was just that. At college in Virginia, I found the people to be ambitious and filled with vision. In my junior year, I returned to Williamstown, feeling I had something to offer. I would try to awaken those I knew. Mother suggested I write letters, asking for a summer job. I received one answer, but no job offers. So Mother also said, "You have two cousins living in West Medford, just outside of Boston. They are lovely people, and they would love to meet you." So on Saturday, June 25th, 1939, Father and I climbed to his 1929 Buick and headed for West Medford. We left Williamstown, that's Williamstown, Massachusetts, at 2 in the afternoon. On the day before, Father had replaced the brakes and the engine gasket. We headed up the Mohawk Trail to the Whitcomb Summit. There the engine began to smoke and the brakes began to seize. We limped down the trail into Greenfield, where the mechanic relocated the gasket and adjusted the brakes. At 7 in the evening, we reached West Medford, and Cousin Florence and Cousin Ed rushed out to greet us. I will always remember the warm and genuine hugs. That they lived at 176 Jerome Street. You know. The next evening, Cousin Florence took me to the Shiloh Baptist Church on Lincoln Street. I was introduced and asked to say a few words. I mentioned that I was a junior at Hampton. Later, a deacon rushed up and said he was a graduate, a 1915 graduate of Hampton. Love and caring seemed to fill Shiloh Church. From that moment, I was in love with West Medford. I knew that after graduating from Hampton, I would return to West Medford. This was a community where I could be with people. I spoke with Cousin Florence, who said, "By all means, Oscar, we'd love to have you." After 2 days in West Medford, Father and I returned to Williamstown, where I felt more lonely than ever. Then in September, I returned to Hampton. On May 27, 1941, I graduated from Hampton. The next day, I reached age 23. There I was older, with no job and no money. That evening, I left Hampton and spent 3 days in New York City worrying about my future. Returning to Williamstown was out of the question. On Sunday, May 30th, 1941, I left New York City and headed to West Medford. Although I did not notify my cousins I was coming, they greeted me warmly. The next day, Cousin Florence called the job administrator, who promised me an interview the first week of July. Days later, Mother called me from Williamstown to say she was sending me a letter from Hampton. This letter was saying the National Youth Administration in East St. Louis was hiring, and they were interested in me. Enclosed was a job application that I began filling out until I came to the words, "What salary do you expect?" I'd never worked. I wanted to ask for $80 a month, but I was afraid. So I slipped the application into the drawer, and then on the evening of June 16th, Mother called again. "Oscar, there's a telegram here offering you $120 a month." And I was afraid to ask for 80. Within a week, I was on my way to Illinois. Looking back, I'm delighted I did not let Mother convince me to remain in Williamstown. In Illinois, I met Ruby. I taught school in Illinois for 13 months. Then I moved to Rock Island, where I was a machinist for 24 months. Then into the Army until August 3rd, 1946. Then back to West Medford, where I have lived for 70 years. I thank you. Laura, did she disappear?
No, I'm here.
Oh, what did you want to say about questions?
Oh, yes. Are there some questions? Yeah.
Oh, well, not right this minute. If you want to know more about West Medford, this is a booklet many of you have seen, some of you haven't seen, but it was written by, written by Sharon Kennedy and her husband, Dr. Paul D. Lehrman. Would you two stand up so people see who you are? And it was in honor of Doc Counts, that some of you may know, some of you may not know. All right.
Okay, she's going to make you.
All the questions.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right. Oh. Yeah, you want to know.
Oh yeah, following
Yeah,
the questions, if you want to find out the complete story how Oscar met Ruby, it's a really great one. He has that book available, Ruby, A Love Story, and you can hear all the details of how those two met. It's a really good story. And more about Medford, West Medford too. They're available here today, here at the center. And Oscar generous, they're $10 a book, the bargain. I'm sure he'll autograph it for you also. And half the proceedings go towards the West Medford Community Center and the other to the Medford Historic Society, who are both collaborating on this event. That's very generous of you. So that's my little point.
I have to confess, thank you, Laura. I have to confess, the book wouldn't have been written had Ruby known about it. But at this time, anyone might have a question they might want to ask. Anything you want to ask, we'll stop there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How did your family wind up in Williamstown?
They lived in North Carolina and South Carolina, and they came to Williamstown with people who had a summer home in Williamstown. And they liked Williamstown so much, they stayed. And they worked as domestics. That's it. My mother worked there as a domestic, but she was a registered nurse, having graduated from the hospital in New York City, Lincoln Hospital, which is very famous. That's it. They loved Williamstown. I didn't. Yes, sir, you had a question, sir.
Yes. My name is Brian Collins. You may have known my grandfather, Johnny Collins.
Oh, yeah.
He used to tell me stories that they used to be able to swim in the river here. I was wondering if you could confirm or deny that.
The river did become, when I came here in 1941, you could.
Really?
When I returned in 1946, no. Johnny Collins, I will say this, that our son worked at a summer camp in the western part of the state. He got $50 that summer, and they almost killed him. He had to go to the hospital to recover. And so the next year when they ordered $200, he said he didn't want it, so he wouldn't sign for it. Then he became very ashamed, because then he had no summer job, and he was enrolled in a Mass College of Pharmacy at the time. So he did. I remember he got in the car. He said, "Dad, I'd like to borrow the car." And he got the car and he drove around West Medford. Then he came back down Arlington Street to turn in. He didn't mean to do that. Something told him to do that. And as he came down to turn, Johnny Collins raced out of the house. And he said, "Oscar, do you need a job?"
Really? Wow.
And he said, "If you do, come back at 7 o'clock. He came back at 7 o'clock, and our son received a job over at Hood's.
Yeah, yeah.
He was washing out the cars.
Yeah.
But he made that summer $750. That went well with my pocketbook. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. I thought your hand went up.
Mine did. Could you tell a little bit about your job at GE as a writer, and then about when you were, there was a strike at GE, and you were driving in, and you were stopped, and you were in, what is it called? I can't think of the word. Administration. You were a manager.
Yes, I've met.
Okay, so a little bit about the writing and the job, and then that incident when there was a strike and you were in management.
Yeah. Well, I went and I wanted to be a technical writer. Well, when I show up at most of the places to do it, I could see the surprised look on the boss, on the manager's face. Of course, he didn't look at the application or anything. So I finally did get a job with the Gemini project, Gemini space program to write. And I was working with a very fine man in Medford named Dick Dean. I don't know if any of you knew him. And he was a superb writer, a graduate of Boston University. And he taught me a lot. He taught me an awful lot because there was so much I didn't know about technical writing. Yeah. Oh, hi. I hope you get to work more soon than you do here now. All right. And the story I told, I wrote about that.
Yes.
We were told never to cross a picket line because it was dangerous. And Ruby called me and said, Oscar, this is in the winter, there's water gushing out of the furnace. So I climbed in the car and came home, and there's a little puddle there at the bottom. For once, I kept my mouth shut. So I went back, I climbed in the car, and I said, God, I got to cross a picket line. And this was a few days after Christmas, and the pickets were very angry. So I said, oh, what am I going to do? They're going to turn the car over, and I'll be on Channel 7. And so anyway, I drove all the way back. I was very nervous driving back. And I drove up there, and the pickets they saw me coming, and they began to circle faster. And then the ticket master came over, and he looked at me. All he did was look at me. Then he went back to the pickets, and I said, oh boy, they're preparing my lynching right now. So anyway, unexpectedly, they parted. And they took their hats off and put their hats over their hearts. And they started singing, "We Shall Overcome." I got in without any difficulty. But it was very dangerous. Very dangerous when you have a mob.
Yeah.
And they'd been out at that time 106 days. So they had reason to be angry. In fact, as we would drive in sometimes, I see some of the men that work for me, and I tried to wave at them, but they just turned their backs. Yeah. Any more questions there? Yes.
I'm Valerie Washburn, and you knew my dad, William Washburn, at the Grace Episcopal Church.
You speak a little bit louder, I'm kind of hearing.
Okay, I can come down here.
Yeah.
I'm Valerie
Good
Washburn.
seeing you, Valerie.
Hello. So happy to see you here. You knew my dad, William Washburn, the Grace Episcopal Church, and he's been gone for many years. I'm glad you're still with us. I've always been curious how you and Ruby found to settle in at the Grace Episcopal, where she was very active in the
Altar Guild.
Methodist.
Altar Guild?
Yes, the Altar Guild, yes. So I'm just curious how you both discovered Grace Episcopal and started.
Well, I was Episcopalian and had been Episcopalian since June 12th, 1932, when we came here. And so I came to Grace Episcopal at that time, and of course it was lily white at that time, so I didn't know how I'd be received, but it was so friendly. And they invited me back, but I didn't know what I was coming back to that, you know. And Ruby joined the Altar Guild.
Yes.
And she was there, I guess, over 40 years. Yes. But Valerie, she became assistant there, and then she became directress of the Altar Guild. And I remember when Father Noah came just recently, he told me that the bishop told him at the time there were two people at the church who will give you trouble. One was Warren for marriage. And the other one was Ruby Greene. And he said Ruby had a reputation. They called her, the girls who were there, I didn't know anything about this. The girls who were there called Ruby the terror of the altar girl. But then I remember that there was so much going on at the time that we had a change, and there was a lot to do. So Ruby would take me down there Saturday morning to help set up the altar and get things ready. I hated that job. You know, just you know, and she was so meticulous. You know, everything had to be just right. And after we finished setting up the altar and everything, then she wanted to do house cleaning. So I don't think we ever left the altar speaking to each other. And Dorothy Faulkner here can attest to that, because they were fighting all the time.
We never heard.
Yes, sir.
Sir, so I wonder if you met Amelia Earhart.
No. No, I met her sister.
Her sister.
She lived here.
Mrs. Morrissey. Yeah, I still have Mrs. Morrissey's latest 2 books.
Muriel Morrissey.
I don't know too much about that, because the Amelia was lost in 1937, July 1937, if I remember. And I was just graduating from high school then. And I was living in Williamstown, and she was living here. So maybe somebody else knows more about Amelia than I do. Yeah. Any questions, more? I don't want to keep you too long. Yeah.
Not a question, Mr. Greene. My name is Leona Martin,
Yeah.
and you knew my sister Betsy and my mother Evelyn Tyner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I at one time lived on the same street as you,
Yeah.
and I moved to Lexington.
Yeah.
I never saw you so much in Medford as I saw you at the Burlington Mall. They probably wonder what you were doing there. My memory is that you were always there sitting, reading, or writing, or watching the people. Mrs. Greene was off somewhere shopping. I've always felt that you were a patient man to be able to, and I saw you many times, to spend that time just patiently waiting for your wife to finish shopping. It's been a pleasure to know you.
You are so right. I was taken there, and I was put on that bench and told to stay there. On a Saturday morning, we'd get up, and we were going up to the Burlington Mall. I knew nothing about that. So I did, and yeah, you don't know the difficult time I had. I remember your sister had an opportunity to write for Guideposts.
Yes.
But she never came to me with what she had written. See, I knew the formula and so forth. And I don't know why. And I met her once at something. I think she was a minister.
Yes.
She's still a minister?
Yes.
Yeah, and she said she was going to send me what she'd written the next day. I'm still waiting.
I'm doing more preaching than writing, but I'll tell you, I took a picture of you, and I'm going to send it to her and tell her what you're doing these days.
Well, I remember
that what she
I
said?
remember your mother buying a brand new car. I'm talking out of school now. And she wanted to go up to Tanglewood. There was some sort of a meeting up there. And she wanted to drive. And I don't know how well she could see, or how well she could drive, but she made up her mind she was going, and I think either you or your sister had to get in the car with her and go.
It might have been my sister at that time, but Mom was pretty experienced because she used to take us back and forth to Springfield.
Yeah.
But that was harrowing because we were always behind big trucks.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember things then. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Oscar,
Welcome.
what would have happened if Ruby had been married to my husband and he said, no, I'm not going to the mall?
He wouldn't have said no. My wife knew she was only 5 feet tall, and she won every battle in the street. I remember going to something at Chevalier Auditorium, and I walked in and I spoke to someone, and Mayor McGlynn, the other Mayor McGlynn, the father, said, "Is that Ruby Greene's husband?" He didn't know me. Yes, that was my reputation. Any more, and then I won't keep you too long. Yes.
Oscar, I'm from Pennsylvania, and I met Oscar and Ruby over 58 years ago. They were one of the first people that I met when I came up here. And everything that Oscar says about Ruby is so true. Because Ruby, like you said, 5-foot-plus lady, she had the steel hand. Because Oscar would always say, oh my dear, dear Ruby, my dear.
Oh, there are times, you know, there are times that I dream about her. You know, and I lose every time.
Hi, Oscar. I'm Ivy Lerner. I just wanted to comment. I have an uncle and an aunt who've been married forever, and I once said to my uncle, Uncle Al, what is the secret of your happy, happy marriage? And he said, whatever she tells me to do, I do it. And I said, you're a very smart man.
Yes, I learned to do that.
And you never raised your voice?
No. Didn't have to.
What would she say? Oh, yeah.
It wasn't so much what she said, but it was the look. I knew I was in trouble.
I gotcha.
And I was. Yeah, I saw somebody's hand back there.
I think it was me.
Yes.
I'm Diane Landis, Valerie's sister. I met you when you had that group meeting at your residence. I met you once. But I read this book. I can't remember the title, but it was Strangers in the title.
Yeah.
And that was...
Or a book?
Your first book. Your first
book. Oh, the first book, yeah. That was the best book.
That was excellent.
Yeah, House of Strangers.
Yes.
House of Strangers, yeah. Oh.
And
that was the first book, and that was the best.
I wrote you about thanking you for it, and you very graciously wrote me back.
This one's for
Oh, good.
I got the ruby. Yeah, I got the ruby. But not
House of Strangers. Okay. I wrote this book, and I autographed 2 copies immediately. One went to Ruby, the other went to my sister in New York, and she sent it back to me and didn't speak to me for 7 years.
That's terrible.
I didn't say anything about her here in the book. But she said I was putting all my business in the street. Yeah.
Mr. Greene, can you get a copy of that book?
I don't think so.
No, okay.
You can, if you just Google it, you can get it online.
You
know.
can?
We can?
Amazon, oh yeah, that's, yeah. yes,
Still in print.
I thought that
You
the
get
book
anything.
was out of
On
print.
Amazon.
But that I think is the best, really. If I can be, so, you know.
If you go to Amazon.com,
Thank you.
all the books that are here, some are for sale now, but all the books that are looking, that Mr. Greene refers to are on Amazon.com, and according to my phone, there are some available, so.
Okay, thank you.
Go quick.
Go quick.
But you have to tell them it costs more now.
That's okay.
They're not too,
Because,
but they're worth it.
Yes.
oh yes, yes.
As your neighbor on Sharon Street for many years, we used to chat all the time. And I remember you told me, one of the ways you got
A
along.
little bit louder, dear.
One of the ways you got along well with Ruby was because you did the housework. You did all the house cleaning.
Pardon?
You told me that you did the house cleaning at home. You told me that you enjoyed doing that. And I read the book that talked about your childhood and growing up in Williamstown. And one of the things was that your father had you very busy, and there was one thing that always got you very nervous, and that was when he said, "It's time for spring cleaning." Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, spring cleaning will come New Year's Eve. Even to today, I can't stand spring cleaning. Yeah, he got so excited about it. But you used to do that early in the spring. No. He was a pain in the neck. You know, and the spring cleaning would start right after breakfast and go to 10 o'clock at night. You see, the home was 14 rooms, and we rented out to people of color certain rooms, vacations and so on. It was a beautiful home, spotless and everything like that. And I was so glad to get away to school so I didn't have to deal with it. But yeah, spring cleaning there. But in the home here, I think you asked me, who asked me did I do the, you?
Yes, you had told me that you enjoy having everything so nice and neat in the house, and you place the lamp in just a certain place so that the light would reflect in a certain direction. And I said, oh my goodness. I
And you didn't feel sorry for me? But I did, well, Ruby, of course, worked in town, so I did the cleaning, I did the washing of the windows, I did the washing, I did the ironing, I did the changing of the beds, I did the cooking, I did the shopping.
Now that's the kind of husband
I tell every man, don't do it. No. Well, thank you very much.
We'll be selling the book right over here for $10, and then you can come over here, and I think Mr. Greene probably will autograph it for you, right?
What's it going to be divided between, the proceeds divided between
Yes.
the two organizations?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So right over here, the book's available here, and we have wonderful refreshments in the back, okay? All right? So,
Thank you for coming.
I have some with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.